We hadn't expected you to come. Mom was concerned it might affect the atmosphere. That's what my sister murmured when I entered the restaurant. Alone. My name is Amelia. I'm 41 years old, with 14 years of military service. Yet to my family I remain the one with the cropped hair, unmarried and in their view, overly opinionated. No seat had been saved for me. No one inquired about where I'd been. As I reached for the breadbasket, my uncle leaned over and asked, loud enough for everyone to hear, "So, what's next?" "A grocery store job." What they didn't know was that I had just declined a classified post at the Pentagon, because I refused to trade my conscience for convenience. Have you ever been dismissed by the very people who claimed pride in your story? Feel free to share below. It had been over 14 years since I returned home. And there I was, at Laurel Oak, the most exclusive restaurant in Magnolia Ridge, wearing a slightly ill-fitting navy dress, seated beside the swinging kitchen doors, surrounded by the scent of garlic and industrial dishwashers. No one stood to greet me. The hostess barely made eye contact. "You're with the Ford party," she said, gesturing to the far end of the room. I approached the table. Conversations continued as if I were invisible. As if I'd never existed. Across the flicker of candlelight and polished silverware, I saw my sister Vanessa, perfectly styled, speaking with ease and polish. She draped her arm around the mayor and proclaimed, "Our new community initiative is launching soon, fully backed by Crane Ventures." She did not acknowledge me. Not with a glance. Not with a word. Just the erasure of history, refined and rescripted in a crimson dress. When our mother rose to speak, her voice swelled with pride. She celebrated Vanessa's booming startup, cousin Brian's med school acceptance, the youngest child's spelling bee win. There was no mention of me. Still I raised my glass. What else was there to do? Later a great-aunt leaned toward me, her bifocals trembling slightly. "What is it that you do in the military, dear?" "Something with food logistics." I did not respond. Because the truth that I'd led combat missions would never align with their sanitized notions of patriotism. When dessert arrived, Vanessa leaned down and whispered, "You came back just in time." But Mom didn't want the energy to feel overshadowed. "You understand." I looked at her. Still the same girl who copied my homework, then blamed me when we got caught. The next morning, I woke in a motel room that smelled of bleach and vacancy. No one had offered me a place to stay. Not even a perfunctory invitation. The only message on my phone was from my father. "Thanks for coming. Your mother's tired. Not up for visitors." I wandered into town to clear my mind. Magnolia Ridge had not changed. But I had. And then I saw it. Vanessa's boutique, the gold thread. In its front window, a massive portrait of her wearing a military-style dress uniform, complete with a bronze star. I stopped in my tracks. It was a decommissioned design, one that had been pulled from production years ago. Only someone who had stolen it, or bought it illicitly, would possess such a piece. And she wore it like an accessory. Below the photo, a tagline. "From family legacy to civic duty." The memory struck me suddenly. Vanessa's voice drifting over laughter at the previous night's event. "My sister tried the military thing, but it wasn't for her," she'd said lightly to a guest. "I learned from her mistakes. I knew I couldn't handle that kind of structure." Instead of returning to the motel, I walked toward my father's bookstore. The familiar bell chimed overhead. The scent of dust and aging pages lingered, unchanged. So too was the quiet undercurrent of denial that always permeated that space. On his desk sat a gold-trimmed frame. Inside, a fabricated military profile bearing my name, Amelia Ford, Reserve Logistics Division, non-combat. It was false, and poorly written. I had earned the rank of major well before Fallujah. I had never served in logistics. My father emerged from the stockroom and saw me holding the frame. He did not flinch. "She didn't want people to think of you as someone who's killed," he said, his voice low. "You're a woman. You know how your mother is. Vanessa's just easier. For the family." I looked around the room. Vanessa's graduation photo hung front and center in vivid color. My own military portrait sat in shadow, cropped below the chest. No medals. No explanation. No context. I said nothing. I folded the falsified document once, slipped it into my coat pocket, and walked out. The sun was warm that afternoon, but I had never felt colder. I hadn't planned to attend the fundraiser, but after seeing the forged citation and that false profile, I needed to understand just how far Vanessa would go. The event was held at the Magnolia Country Club. Chandeliers sparkled above a jazz quartet. Each napkin was meticulously folded into the shape of a swan. I was placed at table 14, beside the restroom doors, near a drooping potted plant. Across from me, a woman glued to her phone. A man slurring his way through his second bourbon. No one noticed me, not even when Victor Crane took the stage. Yes, that Victor Crane. Real estate magnate. Political benefactor. Vanessa's silent partner. He smiled like a man accustomed to applause he had paid for. "Tonight," he began, "we honor a woman who has risen above a complicated legacy. Vanessa Ford. Proof that excellence can still emerge from a family stained by military misconduct." Froze. Faint. Violation. I had never been charged. Never investigated. Fallujah had left scars but not disgrace. I stepped out into the hallway, struggling to breathe. And then I heard it. Voices from behind a partially open catering door. Vanessa's voice, crisp and composed. She never defends herself. She just absorbs it. Which is perfect, honestly. Then another, her assistance. "Crane just needs something tangible. We still have that old letter she wrote about covering for her squadmate. That'll be enough, if we ever need to keep her quiet." My pulse stopped. There was only one letter they could be referring to. The one I wrote from a hospital bed, explaining why I had refused a promotion. Why I had chosen to protect Marcus Reed, a fellow soldier who had made a dangerous judgment call under fire. A decision that, though controversial, had saved dozens of civilian lives. That letter had been the truth. Not an act of weakness, but of integrity. I had never imagined it would leave the base. Never imagined it would be twisted into a weapon. I left the country club without a word. Back at the motel, I opened my old deployment trunk. Inside, folded, worn, and still heavy, was the original letter. Untouched. Except now I knew. Someone had stolen a copy. I was sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup when the phone rang. Unknown number. But the voice on the line was unmistakable. Colonel Harrow. I arrived in Magnolia Ridge that afternoon. Laurel Oak. A quiet message had come through earlier. "Some folks need reminding who you are." No further details. None were needed. That evening, I walked into the same ballroom where, years ago, I had been seated near the swinging kitchen doors. Only this time, it was young leaders of Magnolia Night. Vanessa stood at the center of it all, elegant in an emerald gown, her voice polished with rehearsed humility. "My sister served once," she said to the crowd, omitting my name. "Combat is difficult. I learned from her journey." Applause followed. A few heads turned in my direction, some squinting, trying to place a familiar face. And then the doors opened. 10 individuals entered, dressed in civilian clothes but with unmistakable military bearing. At the front, Colonel Harrow. He walked straight toward me, came to attention, and saluted. "Welcome back, Major General Ford," he announced clearly. "It's an honor to stand beside my former commander from Fallujah." The room fell into stunned silence. Vanessa blinked. My mother gasped. The mayor nearly dropped his wine glass. Harrow turned to address the gathering. For those unfamiliar, General Ford led Operation Emberline, the rescue of 42 civilians under fire in the Red Sector. She was the youngest recipient of the Valor Cross that year. Vanessa attempted to interrupt, her voice faltering. But Harrow continued without pause. She declined a promotion to preserve her team's integrity. She later exposed an illegal arms deal, one that endangered both our unit and innocent lives. This time the gasps weren't from shock. They were from recalculation. At the back of the room I saw him, the same photographer from my mother's birthday dinner. His lens captured the scene. Not just my expression, but Vanessa's unraveling. A moment of truth, finally returned to its rightful owner. I didn't stay for dessert. As I left the ballroom, a line of former soldiers stood by the exit. Each offered a nod of respect. One murmured softly, "Mom." That word struck harder than any applause ever could. 2 days later, headlines spread across every major outlet. Military Times, The Washington Post. Fallujah cover-up exposed. General Amelia Ford speaks out. Victor Crane's empire collapsed overnight. He was arrested. And I was formally recognized as a federal whistleblower. It should have felt like justice. But instead it felt quiet. I returned to Magnolia Ridge under a cloudy sky. My parents were waiting. The living room looked unchanged except for them. Without speaking, my father crossed the room, took down the framed, falsified report from the wall, and tore it in two. "I didn't have the courage to stand with you," he said, his voice thick. "But I see now, it was your courage that kept us all standing." Later, I found Vanessa dismantling what remained of her startup. She looked at me through tear-reddened eyes. "I just wanted Mom to look at me the way she looked at you," she whispered. "But I forgot what you had to survive to earn that." He nodded. "You don't need to become me. You just need to stop turning other people's wars into your stage." That afternoon, we visited Marcus Reed's grave. His daughter Lily held my hand. "You're the woman who speaks for Daddy," she said quietly. I knelt down and placed his eagle pin in her palm. "Would you like to stay with me for a while?" "Yes. Somewhere you don't have to hide who you love." She nodded. 3 months later, we opened the Marcus Reed Veterans Resource Center. My name was on the plaque, but the spotlight was reserved for others. Lily held a photograph of her father. Vanessa stood in the back row. There were no cameras, no speeches, only presence. And in that moment I understood. Some battles change the world. Others simply ensure the truth survives it. If this story resonated with you, let me know where you're watching from, or just leave a comment. Still here. Because surviving alone is one thing. But rebuilding, that takes all of us. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe.